It's crazy how good games can sometimes not get the recognition they deserve, especially when the game is made by one of the most prestigious studios in the business. But that, kids, is why we don't just go around signing console exclusivity deals willy-nilly. Now, Insomniac games are no strangers to the odd console exclusive deal. They've made Spyro, that's on PlayStation. They've made Ratchet and Clank, that's also on PlayStation. You've got Resistance, that's on PlayStation. Spiderman, actually, as a matter of fact, they're all on the same platform.
It's the Hammock Complex down on 3rd?
Or the Hammock District.
But you already know about all of those. You're here to hear about The Forgotten Gem, a game that has a cult following and a very ambiguous future. So let's talk about Sunset Overdrive and why we aren't talking about it today. Wall running, jumping over buildings in a single bound, crossing from one side of an open world to another without ever touching the ground. And we're not talking about Spider-Man. This all started for Insomniac in 2014, when they released an Xbox exclusive that was all about momentum. And I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't have gotten Spider-Man without first getting Sunset Overdrive. Hell, these animations when vaulting over buildings are borderline identical, and ever since Sunset Overdrive introduced the mid-air dash, it can be seen across almost all their future games, not just Spider-Man. Before we get into the similarities, let's start with what the fuck this game is even about. You're working sanitation at an energy drink / music festival. This world doesn't need a company like Umbrella making medicine and being evil because fuck science. Instead, we get Fizco, a company that makes, you guessed it, energy drinks, but it's the same difference. They've cleverly disguised a 40-year-old man to blend in with the youths and sell their new drink, Overcharge. People drink Overcharge, turn into mutant monsters because fuck science, and cause a commotion on a train that is so big, no amount of staring at your feet and pretending you can't hear it is going to make it go away. They chase you home, you get a shotgun that looks like a huge dick, blah blah blah, you've heard it all before. You get introduced to a nerd and his bullies, a samurai scout troop with a leader so good at surviving, he ate his own arms and legs without batting an eye, a bunch of LARPers who now think that that's their real life, and a trio of Latina cheerleader assassins who enjoy celebrating the Day of the Dead year-round. Then of course, there's the ending, but I'm not going to get into that here. What's important to know is that this is the most video game-ass video game I've ever played, and frankly, I can't remember the last time I got so much pure joy from one. Every element of this game is designed to make you have a good time, and remind you that, hey, this is a video game, don't take it so seriously.
Thank you for not making me start at the bottom.
The characters are huge stereotypes, but fun and full of pop culture references. The missions themselves can be a little repetitive, but every now and again you come across an absolute corker. Like this one mission where you're trying to figure out what your objective is from a guy that only says the word hardcore. Or this one where you need to strip down and get covered with leeches for medieval reasons. Even your character, known only as player, is constantly breaking the fourth wall in a way that would make even Deadpool blush.
How'd you think you were gonna do that when I got this here gun?
Yeah, I got guns too.
Damn!
The humor is definitely not geared towards kids, unlike other Insomniac games either, with jokes that honestly made me laugh out loud multiple times and caught me off guard.
Hey, are you Lawrence? Lawrence the leper?
I ain't a leper. Ignatius just calls me that because I gave his sister crabs.
This style and energy that comes through its writing and colorful world is backed up by its character customization. The actual choices for what your person look like is a bit shallow compared to the stuff you find today, but where it shines, almost better than any other game though, is with its clothes. Now, I'm the guy that if you give me a bunch of unlockable costumes to use, I'll probably ignore all of them and play with the default costume because in my head, that's what the character's supposed to wear. It's what's on the cover of the box, what I see in the trailers. I feel like it makes the experience as authentic as possible. After the intro cutscene here though, the game tells you it's been 17 days since Horror Night and gives you the option to change your outfit. I immediately did this, turning my War and Peace knockoff from superhero to super hobo, because I thought that's what would have happened to a man that survived only off beer for 2.5 weeks. Each time I met a new group of people, I would rebrand myself, and for as silly and crazy as everything looked, not only did I pull it off, but it all felt like it fit in. It felt like I was standing out by not experimenting. I even made a version of what I think Jack would look like if he lived through a second apocalypse. There is a lot of fun to be had here. When it comes to the gameplay, the best way to describe Sunset Overdrive is that it's part Ratchet and Clank, part Spider-Man, and part Tony Hawk Pro Skater. So why the fuck are we not still talking about this game? Whoa, chill, we'll get to that. Let's just go through all these ingredients first before accidentally dumping in the chemical X. You really expect me to think that was an accident? I mean, come on, I'm 28 now. You can't keep pulling the wool over my eyes. The ingredient it takes from Ratchet is the guns. They are big, crazy, and plentiful here. Regardless of if you purchase the weapon from Two Hat Jack, bonus points to the person who can tell me that origin story in the comments, or you build it during a mission DIY style, guns fall into one of two categories: overwhelmingly silly and childish, or overtly sexually explicit. Not only can you strap a teddy bear to a stick of dynamite and call it a TN Teddy, but the leveling system from Ratchet also makes its way across here. As you'd expect, expect, guns will get stronger, with more ammo and damage being dealt as they gain XP the more you use them. Now, Spider-Man offers its traversal to the mix. Well, not just its traversal actually, it also offers its 2 leading voice actors to play the male character and one of the main character's friends. So yeah, Yuri, Laura, always a pleasure to see you. Traversal is the major point here though, because like I said, it has a lot of direct similarities to its upcoming superhero title. Sunset City is a playground in the truest sense of the word. Ratchet and Clank creates a world that's designed with a look but don't touch approach. But Sunset Overdrive not only encourages you, but borderline forces you to touch everything on a pretty regular basis. Where you see a car, I see a springboard. Where you see an umbrella, I see a springboard. Where you see an air vent, well, you get the idea. Lots of things act as springboards. Once you're off the ground, unfortunately our dollar store Peter Parker doesn't have webs, but he does have Ratchet's feet. Just like our dirty little Lombax, Sunset Overdrive wants you to grind like a motherfucker. This is where our pro skater comes into play, because grinding is how you'll cover most of your ground quickly. While you can't do tricks, and I'm yet to find a half pipe in Sunset City, anything that you would expect to grind on in a Tony Hawk game is fair game here. That means railings, power lines, train tracks, edges of buildings, the list goes on. Add into the mix that oh so sweet air dash, and you can string these moves together with the use of only 3 buttons. Like Spider-Man after it, the game makes tricky movements simple by giving you the A button to jump, the X button to grind, wall run, swing, not that kind, this kind, and so on and so forth. Then it uses RB to do an air dash or give you a boost of speed when grinding or wall running. These simple controls fall into that easy to learn but difficult to master category, but it does mean picking up and playing can be very quick. Now this drastic change meant for as impressive as all these systems were, there were also a few that fell short. The first being the mix of traversal and combat. This game is all about momentum, and there is one simple rule you need to follow. Don't stop moving.
Don't even blink.
Because staying still will make you easier to kill. As such, the traversal that feels so good in wide open spaces can feel a little clumsy and unwieldy in smaller areas, since you're constantly pointing the camera in a direction that you aren't moving, despite the fact that you're also not stopping. This is made even more noticeable by the way the guns themselves are designed. Every gun works effectively the same way. You point it at an enemy until you see a red reticle. If you fire when you see it, your shot will hit that target, very similar to if you've ever played a Ratchet and Clank game. The issue with this is it doesn't work as well in a world where you're constantly moving and also can't see where you're going. For me, aiming a gun with the right stick makes perfect sense if your combat is based on some level of skill or precision, like headshots doing more damage or being able to target weak points, for example. Other games take a different approach, like Tomb Raider. In the original games, you would have a lock-on button, one you would just hold down and always keep the enemy in your sights, meaning the combat wasn't necessarily focused on your skill of aiming, but your concentration of movement and dodging. Sunset Overdrive strikes a balance that takes the worst parts of both of these systems, in my opinion, by giving you a lock-on system, but one that still takes your motor skills and attention away from your movement. By taking things just that one step further and adding in either a lock-on trigger for your weapons or making the aiming more skill-based like a traditional third-person shooter, I think it would have elevated it to a much more satisfying gameplay loop. On top of that, the weapons didn't feel as balanced or as necessary as they ever did in Ratchet and Clank, and this is due to a number of reasons. If you're a Ratchet and Clank fan, and I'm guessing if you're on my channel, you've probably at least checked it out, then you would have probably done those playthroughs where you will use every gun, even if it's the shit one, just to get it leveled up to max. You can do this with pretty much all the weapons in a single playthrough. In Sunset Overdrive though, by the end of my playthrough, I think I'd gotten 2 of my weapons to level 5, despite this game being much longer than any Ratchet and Clank game. Because of this, I wasn't constantly churning through weapons and buying new ones to level up, and I focused on the same core 5 or so weapons I started the game with. This was a bit of a blessing in disguise though, because despite not spending any money on new guns, by the time I got to the final mission, I still couldn't afford to get the most expensive gun, let alone all the other weapons that I'd neglected to purchase as well. And before you say, well, sure looks like you spent a lot of money on that weird vampire getup, there are technically 7 different types of currency in total, each going towards a different thing. Money is earned from scabs and human enemies, which are used for clothes. Overdrive is collected from your mutated OD enemies and used for weapons. 5 different types of collectibles scattered throughout the open world make up the last type of currency, each one being used for a different type of amp. There is a lot going on in this map. And let's talk about amps for a moment. These are basically mods like from A Crack in Time and are actually pretty great. You can apply any weapon mod to any weapon you own, as well as getting specific mods for the players that can impact your traversal and gameplay in different ways. There's also an overdrive system that works similar to Skyrim, where the more you use certain types of weapons and different traversal methods, you'll unlock different badges you can use to permanently upgrade certain abilities. Again, cool idea, but it's another double-edged sword. Because the game rewards you for using the weapons you have, it was just another thing that discouraged me from trying new types because I knew they wouldn't be as effective as what I was already using. It'd be like trying to make your basically god tier sneaky archer invest their skill points into heavy armor when you hit level 45 just to see what it's like. And this, my friends, is unfortunately where we get monkey pawed, because as good as Ratchet and Clank mixed with Spider-Man mixed with Tony Hawk sounds, 80% of it is amazing, and 20% of it just reveals the flaws in some of its own systems. And while 20% isn't much, I find it happens most with some repetitive missions, particularly during the first half. And if you've only played 50% of the game, a 30-20 split is suddenly looking a lot worse.
Together we'll take Fizco down. Or we won't, but we'll get some wicked respawn animations. Who's with me?
This line really sums up everything you need to know about this game. The characters are crazy, the humor straight up doesn't give a fuck, and not only is it funny, but it's not a throwaway comment. Insomniac has designed a ton of respawn animations, and unless you're going out of your way to try and see them all, you probably won't ever come across the same one twice on a single playthrough. There is honestly so much to love about this game, and it has definitely become one of my new favorites, but it isn't without its flaws. Insomniac has managed to make a literal on-rail shooter without handcrafting enemy encounters because they've given us 20 rails to choose from and they don't know which one we're gonna pick. On top of that, they've basically given us an early Spider-Man game, if in that game we just weren't allowed to stop swinging or touch the ground. And I realized that I just described Spider-Man, the movie, the game, and obviously that's not what I was going for. So what's next for Sunset Overdrive? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like a whole lot. Despite the game being published as an Xbox exclusive, part of the agreement in place to lure Insomniac away from Sony was that Insomniac would retain the rights to the Sunset Overdrive IP. This effectively means that while Microsoft owns the original Sunset Overdrive and its chances of coming to PlayStation are pretty slim, Insomniac still owns the rights to the IP and would be allowed to make another one. At least, that was the case until 2019, when Sony Interactive Entertainment acquired Insomniac and took ownership of them along with all their IP. So technically, Sony owns the rights to Sunset Overdrive. Microsoft owns the actual game Sunset Overdrive. And Insomniac has their hands more than full with Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, and you would imagine another entry to the Ratchet and Clank series. Despite an interest from the studio to go back to Sunset City, ex-head of SIE Sean Layden said that Sunset Overdrive wasn't a priority for the team, and you can kind of see why given what's been announced and delivered from that studio since then. If you want to check it out, it's still available on Xbox Game Pass on both Xbox and PC. While you're in the mood for checking things out, if you don't think you've fully appreciated just how badass the weapons are in this game, then why don't you watch this ad on why you should buy one of their nuclear powered swords. I'll see you there. Let's go.
I'm not gonna lie, daughter had fun, her brain fried. My lady Papa Zenny,